Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I want to bring you straight to the White House on this 200th day of the second Trump term for a conversation that dovetails off everything we just discussed with Laura. Stephen Miran has the president's ear when it comes to the economy. He is chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors and with us now from the North Lawn on what is, by the way, it's got to be, Stephen, the most beautiful day of the year so far in Washington. Mr. Chairman, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. It's good to see you. Day 200 and the tariffs take effect. I guess we'll start there. Is this it? Are we here? This is the tariff regime? Realizing you've got an extension with Mexico, you're working on a deal with China. These are the numbers that we've been waiting for. Yes, will they stay in place the way they are?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be back. Look, I think that the restructuring of the global trading system that the president has undertaken and successfully executed has been nothing short of historic. We've got trade deals encompassing material tariff rates, bringing in large amounts of revenue with almost no retaliation from countries that now entail about 55 to 60% of global GDP. And that's going to bring in trillions of dollars of revenue over a decade. It creates very strong incentives for making stuff in the United States. And the investment commitments that the president has secured are going to do wonders for getting firms to invest in America.
So if it's going to bring in trillions, then I guess these are the numbers that we'll assume will be in place until further notice. But I'm curious, I saw the president's Truth Social last night. He says it's midnight, we're here. Do we have a sense of how much money the Treasury has inherited in the last 13 hours or so?
So I don't have a sense about what's happened in the last 13 hours or so, but as you know, in the last month we saw a record print of about $30 billion in the month alone from tariffs, and that was before the higher rates really set in. The CBO did a study when the One Big Beautiful Bill was under consideration in Congress, finding that the total effect of the tariffs would be about $3 trillion over the course of a decade. I think that tariff rates have moved a little bit higher since then, and so my team is actually currently crunching through the numbers right now as we speak with the new tariff rates, but I wouldn't be surprised if the final number is closer to $4 trillion over a decade instead of $3.
Fantastic. Is that something that you'll be able to make public soon? When will we see that research?
Oh yes, I hope so. It's in process right now. I've got several of my staff working on it at the moment.
I love that. Getting a little peek behind the curtain here. To the extent that we're curious about the economic impact of tariffs, Mr. Chairman, there has been a grand debate, and your administration is on one side of it, about whether tariffs are inflationary. Now that we actually have the numbers, there's also been reference from yourself and from the likes of Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent about a one-time change in prices as opposed to an inflationary trend. When will we know the impact of that one-time change?
Thanks. So, look, you're right. There's been a lot of conversation about this subject, and I think that a few things are worth mentioning. One, we ran this experiment in 2018, 2019. We saw zero macroeconomically significant evidence of tariff-driven inflation then. Two, we've been running higher tariffs in this administration since the very first day, since January 20th. We've now got several months of data, and again, there's just zero macroeconomically significant evidence of price pressures from tariffs. Three, the overall policy mix is extremely disinflationary. When you think about deregulation, when you think about incentives for increased capital stock, increased labor supply from no taxes on overtime, things like that, that's very disinflationary. The border policies are very disinflationary as well. And I think that people are underestimating the amount of service-driven disinflation that's in the pipeline. And I think when you look at the housing market holistically, you get a sense of that as well. So overall, we don't expect significant inflation from the tariffs. And Secretary Bessent is right. If there were to materialize some inflation from tariffs, it would be a one-time price level shift, not an enduring trend, in the same way that a VAT tax would cause that. And there have been many countries throughout the world that have VAT taxes that change those VAT taxes. And when they move them up or they move them down, you get a price level shift. You don't get a new inflation regime that lasts years.
Yeah. Well, then it becomes a question of, who's actually paying for this beyond the specific importer who's standing on the dock here. We're going to talk later with Stu Leonard Jr., the force behind Stu Leonard's, the chain of grocery stores up in New York and Connecticut and the Northeast. It's a really interesting conversation because he said that prices for him are, in fact, costs are rising. And the more important thing he said was he can't afford to absorb it. He's got to pass it along to his customers. What do you say to the CEO, specifically of a small business who's experiencing this phenomenon?
What I would say is that adjustments are difficult and adjustments don't happen overnight. And in the fullness of time, I have no doubt that the countries that we are placing tariffs on will ultimately bear the burden of those tariffs, either through lower prices or through another channel like currencies, as happened in 2018, 2019 with China. Now, that's an argument in the fullness of time. In the short run, there can be price volatility, right? We had volatility in financial markets. We have now seen a little bit of volatility in the real economy as well. And it wouldn't be surprising to me or to anybody else if we saw volatility in prices as in consumer prices as well. However, I think that's merely a short-run adjustment phenomenon. The incentives to make a profit, the bedrock principles of a capitalistic economy will mean that folks like Stu Leonard and others will find ways to provide products to consumers for cheaper, because that's what consumers want. And they'll find ways to adjust their supply chains, to adjust whom they're buying from, to take advantage of different tariff rates in different countries, and find ways to get others to absorb those costs, because they have an incentive to do so.
They're going to have a lot of work to do. I want to ask you about the tariffs on chips and semiconductors. Read headline on the terminal last evening, Mr. Chairman, when the president said 100% as he was talking to reporters in the Oval Office. But I realize there are some very important exceptions here for chip designers and chip makers who are actively investing and building in the United States. And to my read, that covers most of the majors here, including TSMC, which is building in Arizona and some other places. Who would this tariff actually impact, or will it not touch anyone other than a foreign maker like, say, Huawei that isn't already selling here?
Yeah, so not to get ahead of Secretary Lutnick and the other folks who are going to be designing this program, but I would be surprised if there weren't some guardrails around those criteria to make sure that companies were doing the types of investments that warranted that type of exemption that you just mentioned, right? And so are countries investing enough to build their supply in the United States? Are they making good faith progress and good faith outlays that are leading to actual genuine increases in the productive capacity of the United States? It's not enough to say, oh, I'll build a factory and stick a pickaxe in the ground and then just leave it there for 10 years collecting a tariff exemption. Sure. There's going to be checks to make sure that good faith efforts are made to actually expand production in the United States. And if that's happening, then that's exactly the outcome we want, right? Like, what we want is to increase domestic production of critical components like semiconductors.
Just a minute left here, Chairman. I have to just quickly ask you about the search for a new Federal Reserve chair. Bloomberg is reporting today that Governor Waller, Christopher Waller, is emerging as a top candidate. The president's advisors have been very impressed with his approach to monetary policy. Are you one of those advisors making that recommendation?
Look, I think that Governor Waller has really built up a really impressive track record in the last few years at the Fed, with his predictions about inflation, with his predictions about where Fed policy needed to move to respond to that inflation. And I think he's done himself, a big credit recently as well, not succumbing to the tariff derangement syndrome that many others throughout the country, but particularly at the Fed, seem to have succumbed to. And he's done a really good job having an independent voice, which I think ultimately is proving correct, that there isn't really much of an inflationary threat from tariffs that anyone should really be concerned about, least of all the Fed.
Yeah. It sounds like you're in his corner. That sounds like a yes, Mr. Chairman. It's great to have you with us. Stephen Miran from the North Lawn of the White House. We thank you for the insights, as always. Tariff derangement syndrome. Did he just come up with that?